Hello, everybody. Get off my lawn cards. I'm Dan. Welcome in. And today's show is kind of dedicated to grading. I'm not a huge fan of grading, as you've probably seen in other videos. But today there's been a whole lot of movement on the grading front, and I wanted to talk a little bit about it. The title of this video: PSA grading needs us. We don't need PSA grading. And I think that kind of sums up my belief about grading in general, for the most part. I do think grading helps with certain things in the hobby. I think it helps with cards that are often counterfeited. I think it helps with vintage cards, where grading can make a big difference in value. Like, I get it. I get certain reasoning for grading, but there's some things that are really hurting the hobby, I think, as a whole. And today we're going to look at some of those, and we're going to look at the number. We're going to kind of dive into some of the numbers when it comes to grading, and a couple ways we can work our way out of this situation where we can make grading, I think, a better experience. I don't think they're going to be very popular ideas, but I do suggest a couple of potential solutions to help with the problem. So, a couple of issues that I've seen recently with grading. Number one, there's been a lot of consolidation in the hobby around grading companies that are going under the umbrella of Collectors Universe. We have PSA, we have SGC, which was really gaining steam as a separate company. They'd always been very popular with vintage graders, but now they were making a move in modern grading, kind of replacing the other company that is now under the Collectors umbrella, which is Beckett. I've got a lot of issues with Beckett. I did a video a long time ago about Beckett and how they really dropped the ball during COVID and became and also ran in grading, which they should never have been. But I'm kind of over that. I'm just not going to grade with Beckett until they get their act together. Hopefully they will under the Collectors Universe banner. So that's one thing that's happened. Consolidation of companies. I don't think that's a good thing. When you take away competition, and they're all kind of separate companies, but are they really, if they're all controlled by one group? I don't think so. Second, there's been an increase in grading fees recently. The grading fee for a card at the lowest level is $25, and that has gone up recently. Like I said, the reasoning is there's such a backlog of cards that need to be graded that, according to PSA, the only thing they could do is raise prices. The idea here is if you raise prices, people will grade less, especially with the fringe cards that are, not going to be super valuable. The margins might be razor thin on those, and so the grading fees have gone up. It's almost like there's a knob that they turn. Well, we're going to increase the fees now, or we're going to increase the grading fees because the backlog is too big. But really, there's not much. I'm surprised they only raised it to $25. I'm surprised they didn't raise it up to $50. They'd get it. That's kind of where the hobby is with a lot of people right now, where it's just kind of a casino gambling. Hey, if I send it in and it gets a 10, it's going to be big. I'm going to give you an example later on of that. Some say, well, why doesn't PSA just increase the number of graders? That's not a short-term solution. PSA has been doing that, and I'll give them credit for that. They have increased the number of grading facilities. They have increased the number of trained graders. So that's good. I think that's stepping in. It takes a while. It takes a long time, I would think, to train somebody to grade. Number one, the eye for grading, but also researching, making sure cards aren't counterfeit or trimmed. I think actually PSA does a really good job, for the most part, of catching issues. You always hear there's a segment of people, content creators on YouTube, that always focus on the scandal of grading, like, oh, this one got past the goalie, but PSA grades 1 million to 2 million cards a month. How many stories do you hear of grading that, where grading went wrong? Very few. So you got to give it up to PSA for that. I'm not totally against PSA, but I think some of the things they do are just accepted that are dumb, that really make no sense. Third, over the last year and a half, 2 years, PSA is really trying to kind of centralize all the processes that you could go with cards, where you submit cards to PSA, they grade them, they have a vault that they can put them in, um, they can resell them for you, so they're trying to control all the processes, and in return, they're taking little bites at every step out of what your card is worth. They're getting their share, certainly at every step. And most of the time, I think that goes pretty well. I recently had a card that I sold on eBay that had to go through authentication, and it went through, and I know people have done that. But there's times where things might happen where, there's some, hanky panky, as a couple people like to refer to things in a hobby. Um, where you grade and sell through PSA. PSA tells you, hey, you got these grades on the card. I think there's a guy that did this with Pokemon cards, where they said, hey, these are all 9s, and would you want to sell them? Yes, I'll sell them at PSA 9s. But what he found out was that the cards are actually graded 10s. And PSA claimed there was a glitch, and yeah, maybe it was, but they didn't get downgraded to 8s. There's like 11 cards in the guy's order that were 10s that he didn't know about at first. I find that somewhat, if I put my conspiracy hat on, I'd say that's an issue. So those are some things. Like I said, consolidation of these grading companies, never good for competition. Increase in fees, increase in amount of involvement PSA is in. Now they're controlling like all the different steps that could happen. I don't think that's good. There's issues with fraud that can happen, although, like I said, that's a very small amount. I don't blame PSA for all of this. I don't put that in their lap. They're providing a service that they're not forcing collectors to do. A lot of the blame is on us as collectors. And we got to fix it on our end a little bit before they fix it on their end. Okay, I've got my trusty whiteboard up here. And what is causing the backlog at PSA? Well, the one-word answer is Pokemon. TCG/non-sport cards are a huge percentage of the cards that are being graded currently. TCG, specifically Pokemon, is going through the same process that sports cards went through during COVID. There's a huge amount of people that are getting back into collecting Pokemon from years ago where they might have been a part of it. And then there are also people that recognize, hey, Pokemon is hot right now. Let's get in on it. Let's buy and flip. And it's following the exact same script, like I said, as COVID for sports cards. I did a little deep dive into this. There was a guy that has a very good video about this. His name is Zachary Smigel. I'll put it in the description if you're interested. He does a very good job of going through all the little details. All I wanted were just the numbers. And I don't really understand the Pokemon game, but I understand numbers. And he had some really interesting numbers, as does GemRate. Side note on GemRate, when I was at the National a couple years ago, a group of us were waiting in line at the Topps booth, because that's what you do at the National. If you've never been there, you don't know, but if you've been there, you know, because Topps is usually terrible about stuff. Anyways, this kid, he was probably a high school kid or just in college. He was on his phone and he had all these like PSA reports and stuff. And I was just like, hey, if you don't mind me asking, what is that? And he's like, oh, my dad developed this. This is GemRate.com. And so I follow it on Instagram, and they gave me the numbers for this stuff. If you're interested in PSA numbers, GemRate does a very good job. Like I said, you can follow them on Instagram. I don't know. I think they're also on Twitter, but it's easier on Instagram. Anyway, so let's look at the numbers. With TCG, in the last 1.5 years, there has been a 300% increase in number of cards graded. 300%. All right. In it dominates the hobby so much that, or as far as number of cards graded, not the hobby specific, but in 2025, 99 of the top 100 most graded cards were TCG. There was only one sports card. I think it was Jaden Daniels Prism Rookie that cracked the top 100. Just to give you an idea of how big this is, how and it's what's causing all the issues right now with backlog. Sports cards have actually declined in the last 18 months. The exception, I think, was football. Football had a small, like a 10% rise, but like basketball was down because last year's rookie class was pretty bad. Ricochet, Alex Sarr. Baseball was also down a little bit, I believe. So there you have it. Now, this graph kind of shows the history of Pokemon cards, TCG. Let's just put it all under one umbrella. The TCG group. In 2013, we're not talking about a month, we're talking about the entire year. Okay? About 19,000 Pokemon cards were graded in all of 2013. 18,000. That's roughly about 80 every business day that were graded. You know, a person could knock that out in a couple hours, I would assume. One person. Okay, so TCG wasn't a big presence in 2013. Fast forward to June 2024. This is about a little less than 2 years ago. There was roughly about 376,000 TCG cards graded in that month. Okay, so there's a pretty big jump. About 20 times more just in 1 month we're talking. And last month, February 2026, we saw a jump, less than 2 years later, up to 1.2 million TCG cards graded in February 2026, last month alone. All right. So this is what's causing our backlog, is TCG. And like I said, sports cards are actually down from where they were last year, and certainly down quite a bit from where they were during COVID. During COVID, obviously, we had the big spike, people with a lot of disposable income, and buying cards, grading cards, etc. So those are the big numbers. Okay, so by the numbers, using GemRate as my source, crazy numbers with TCG. February of 2026, we had 1.86 million cards graded by PSA during that month. Of that 1.86 million total, 1.24 of it was TCG. If you're looking for a percent, 67% of all graded cards last month were TCG. And if you're going to shows like I do, you'll notice there is a big jump. There has been a big jump in the number of TCG tables. And I don't have an issue with that. I've said that many times in videos. The people that are buying and selling TCG at these shows, they're very nice people. We sold at a show a couple months ago. We were sandwiched between two TCG tables and just had very interesting conversations with those guys, because I don't really know anything about TCG. And, they were very, they didn't look at us like, boy, guys are a bunch of rubes or whatever. They're just like, oh, no, this is the way we do things. And this is, they kind of went through the basics. And so like 67% TCG. The numbers remind me a lot, like I said, of COVID times. And we've got to kind of find a solution. What we're doing right now is giving PSA way too much power over the hobby. As far as control of what cards are valuable over money in the hobby, we're just giving way too much credit to a company that, to be honest, is based on somebody looking at a card and giving it a number grade. And yes, they're trained, but even trained eyes aren't going to catch everything. Okay, so what are the solutions? Let's take a look at. Okay, my solutions. These are not going to be very popular. But if we want to get this under control, sometimes we have to do unpopular things. Number one, stop grading ultra modern cards. Why are we sending ultra modern cards, especially base cards? Okay, I probably should have wrote that on there, but especially base cards. The second part will take care of the non-base cards. Second solution. 80 to 90% of ultra modern cards get a 9 or a 10 grade. 80 to 90%. It depends on the release. Any cards, for instance, with black borders, a little harder to get 10s and 9s versus 8s because of chipping and all that. The gap between a 9 and a 10 in ultra modern is crazy. It's crazy. I get it with vintage. A 52 Mantle in a PSA 8 should be probably a lot different than a PSA 3 or a PSA 5. I get that. I totally get it. You know? But with ultra modern cards, if everything is a 9 or a 10 practically, why is there such a gap between a 9 and a 10? Let me give you an example. Modern card. Probably the biggest card right now, or one of the biggest cards in basketball. The Topps Chrome Cooper Flag base Chrome rookie. Okay, base Chrome rookie. In a PSA 10, one recently sold for about $500. Okay, with shipping and taxes and all that, about $500. A PSA 9, the most recent PSA 9 sale, was $60. We should be ashamed as collectors of paying that big of a difference between an ultra modern 9 and an ultra modern 10. It's ridiculous. What are we doing to ourselves? I totally don't get it. We're just so, we're feeding the beast here. You know, we're addicted to PSA 10s. I mean, 9s are fine, in my opinion. I don't get it. We're beating ourselves up, and PSA is laughing all the way to the bank. Plus, they upcharge you, which that's a whole different video. People just accept that. Well, they're upcharge. Hey, that must be because it's more valuable. Yes, PSA is well aware of that. If I was going to believe one conspiracy theory in the hobby, it's that PSA and other grading companies, if they PSA does this only, they'll upcharge to make more money off you if it's close. That's my conspiracy Dan theory. Okay. Second, this one's not going to be popular because I know where everybody's going to go with this one. You got to overprint cards. Overprinting cards creates a bigger supply. If you have a bigger supply, by law of economics, you're going to drop the price down because there's a lot of it. Topps understood this with the flagship basketball when they started producing it with logos. They produced the crap out of it. The end result there is that you're probably going to get, I think, fewer cards to grade because there's a lot of them out there. And it's going to drop the price of them. All right. Now, for this to work, and I think the same would be true at TCG. If this is going to work, you also at the same time have to have less variations and less chase cards. You know, for instance, Victor Wembanyama a couple of years ago when he came out, Prism overprinted the crap out of that brand. So that's not too bad. You can get Wemby's fairly cheap, the base ones. The problem is Wemby had a rough, I don't know exact number of this, but this is the number I did my research. Wemby had about 85 variations in Prism alone. So now you're creating a huge amount of chase cards. And of course, if you hit you get a Cherry Blossom Wemby Prism, you got to get that graded. You got to send that in, where you're going to get a 9 or 10 pretty much guaranteed. And you're going to get upcharged for it. So PSA is going to get their money. And, you might have a winning lottery ticket. You might not. So I just think these are the two solutions. Would they be popular solutions? No, they would not. People want to get their variations. They want to get their chase cards. But the chances of that happening are pretty slim. Some of that, from what I saw with the TCG, some of that's already happening. It's not really working as far as dropping the price of stuff, at least not right now. But I think over time it would. So, if we want PSA to have less control in the hobby, we have to kind of take it upon ourselves in a lot of cases. And we also need to get helped out by the card companies. Fanatics, Panini. Panini's still in the game, to a lesser extent than they have been. But it's got to, we got to stop with this. The crazy backlogs. And I'm not blaming TCG because sports cards had their moment a couple years ago where they created it. Now it's TCG's turn. So if we keep feeding the beast, the situation's not going to get better. So some things to think about. Hopefully you enjoyed the numbers. Like I said, thank you to GemRate for this, for the numbers. Thank you to Zachary Smigel for having a really easy to understand video about TCG and some of the issues. Their issues were almost exactly the same. When I was watching, I was like, man, if you just replace the term TCG with sports cards, it's basically what we did in COVID. TCG actually had a couple new ones, a couple new wrinkles that I didn't remember seeing with sports cards. But fighting over wax in stores, saw it both areas. Having to send everything into PSA, that's what's causing the problems. So until next time, like I said, at the end of the week this week, I'm going to the Shipshewana show. That's Friday afternoon. I'm going to go to the Friday afternoon part of it. And then Saturday, I'm going to a show in Grand Rapids. So it's going to be a busy weekend of shows, which I love. This is a great time of the year to be in West Michigan. A lot of card shows. So until next time, Kitos, thank you. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you down the trail.